Prince William and Kate Middleton may have entered 2026, believing that their carefully choreographed joint hospital visit would function as a symbolic reset, a visual cue to the public that they remain the steady centre of the royal universe, dependable, compassionate, and untouchable by criticism. Yet what unfolded almost immediately afterward exposed a far more unsettling reality for the palace and its media allies, which is that relevance in the modern era cannot be summoned by tradition alone, and authority no longer guarantees attention. Because just as royal commentators rushed to crown the Wales's appearance as the first major win of the year, Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex appeared together in the United States with no palace briefing, no ceremonial framing, and no visible effort to dominate the news cycle. And yet the public conversation shifted toward them with remarkable ease, not because they demanded attention, but because their presence continues to feel more authentic, more human, and more aligned with contemporary values than the carefully managed performances of those still constrained by royal orthodoxy. And this contrast did not emerge overnight, but is the result of years of diverging paths, where William and Kate chose to remain embedded within an institution that rewards silence, emotional restraint, and unquestioning compliance, while Harry and Meghan Sussex made the deliberate and costly decision to step away from that system in order to build lives centered on purpose, honesty, and self-determination. And it is precisely this divergence that makes moments like this so revealing, because the Wales's appearance, while outwardly worthy, carried the unmistakable feel of obligation rather than inspiration, a duty fulfilled rather than a connection formed. Whereas the Sussexes' outing felt organic, relaxed, and rooted in real partnership, offering the public a glimpse of a life lived rather than a role performed. And in an age where audiences increasingly value authenticity over hierarchy, that distinction carries immense weight, particularly when the British media has long operated as an informal shield for William and Kate, softening scrutiny, reframing prolonged absences as privacy, and celebrating minimal engagement as quiet dignity, while subjecting Harry and Meghan Sussex to relentless interrogation, misrepresentation, and hostility for asserting boundaries that would be praised if exercised by anyone else, creating a double standard so entrenched that it has become normalised within royal coverage. Yet despite this institutional advantage, the Wales's hold on public enthusiasm appears increasingly fragile, reliant on carefully rationed exposure and sympathetic narratives, while Harry and Meghan Sussex continue to command organic interest simply by showing up as themselves, which raises uncomfortable questions about where genuine public trust now resides, because the hospital visit itself, though noble in intent, bore the hallmarks of repetition rather than evolution, reinforcing the sense that much of the Wales's public life is governed by familiar gestures designed to reassure rather than challenge, while the Sussexes' appearance carried none of that inherited stiffness, instead projecting ease, equality, and forward momentum, qualities that resonate deeply in a global culture increasingly skeptical of inherited authority. And this is especially significant when considering Meghan Sussex's role in this dynamic, because her continued visibility directly confronts a royal culture that has historically expected women to be decorative, deferential, and silent, a culture that rewarded Kate for embodying those expectations while punishing Meghan Sussex for refusing to diminish herself to fit them. And the persistent framing of Meghan Sussex as someone who overshadows others reveals not a flaw in her character but a vulnerability within the institution itself, because confidence and presence are only perceived as threats when power is insecure. And Prince William's position as heir further illustrates this insecurity, because while he is shielded by his future crown, he is also constrained by it, praised for restraint while avoiding accountability, protected from meaningful criticism while benefiting from a system that demands sacrifice from others, including his own brother, whose willingness to speak openly about grief, trauma, and institutional failure has been framed as betrayal rather than honesty, even though history repeatedly shows that progress is driven not by silence, but by those willing to confront uncomfortable truths. And Harry's decision to leave was never about rejecting service, but about redefining it, about choosing to protect his wife and children after witnessing firsthand the devastating consequences of unchecked media hostility and institutional indifference, a lesson tragically inherited from his mother's experience. And while palace defenders have worked tirelessly to portray that choice as selfish or attention-seeking, moments like this reveal a growing public understanding that setting boundaries is not abandonment, and that walking away from harm is not weakness but wisdom. And this shift in perception is precisely why traditional methods of narrative control are losing their potency. Because audiences today are global, discerning, and far less willing to accept authority that demands reverence without accountability, leaving William and Kate in an increasingly precarious position, attempting to project warmth and relevance while remaining bound to a structure that resists transparency and meaningful change, while Harry and Meghan Sussex operate freely in a space where impact matters more than inheritance and values matter more than titles. And it is crucial to note that the Sussexes are not competing for royal approval or British tabloid validation. They exited that arena intentionally. Yet the fact that their presence continues to eclipse palace efforts underscores that the monarchy's greatest challenge is not external criticism, but internal rigidity, an inability to adapt to a world that prizes empathy over ceremony and substance over symbolism. And the opening days of 2026 have merely made this shift more visible. Because when a simple joint appearance by Harry and Meghan Sussex generates more genuine engagement than a choreographed royal visit, it signals a deeper realignment of public interest that cannot be corrected through strategic appearances or sympathetic headlines. And the true tragedy is that this outcome was avoidable because a more self-aware institution could have protected Meghan Sussex, supported Harry, and embraced evolution rather than resisting it. But instead, it chose control over compassion and optics over accountability. And now it must grapple with the reality that the very people it sought to marginalise have built something lasting beyond its reach, a legacy grounded in service without spectacle and connection without condescension, while the Waleses continue to struggle to reconcile tradition with relevance, restraint with relatability, and authority with authenticity. And as 2026 unfolds, moments like this will continue to expose the widening gap between inherited power and earned influence, between those who rely on titles to command attention and those who inspire it through consistency, courage, and clarity of values. And in the end, the most telling aspect of this so-called first blow of the year is not that Harry and Meghan Sussex stole attention, but that they did so effortlessly, without diminishing anyone else, without demanding validation, and without contorting themselves to fit an outdated mould. And that quiet confidence, that refusal to perform for approval, is precisely what unsettles an institution built on hierarchy, because it proves that in the modern world, relevance is not bestowed by birthright, but earned through trust, and increasingly the public appears to understand exactly which family represents that future.